Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
Hey guys, before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you know it is brought to you by Denim. As a business owner myself, I personally know the importance of financial stability and preserving cash flow to help navigate through any freight market. With Denim's comprehensive service offering, you now have an all-in-one financial partner whose platform includes factoring, payments, freight audit, document collection management, and analytics, which help keep your business financially healthy and increase your team's time to focus on revenue-producing activities. You can also take advantage of Denim's free credit check, which they perform on all of your customers. And Denim will proactively reach out to you if they spot any signs of credit deterioration. Finally, Denim always pays your carriers first. As a broker, this is imperative to preserving your credit score in the market, which ultimately helps you become a broker of choice to your carrier partners. Are you ready to learn more? Visit denim.com to schedule a demo today. Just do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. This episode is brought to you by SPI Logistics, the premier freight agent logistics firm in North America. For over 40 years, SPI has been diligently building the most successful freight agent network to provide first-class relationships for our shippers, receivers, and carrier partners. We are more than another transportation network. We are a dedicated team of professionals united by one singular purpose, and that is to expedite our agents' success. All of our agents are set up for success on day one, as they are provided with a full suite of support staff that is ready to assist them with everything from after-hours emergencies to financial and administrative needs on a no-fee basis. This way, you can focus on continuing to grow your business. There is no financial risk to start, and you have the ability to earn up to 75% in commissions. If you are looking to take control of your financial future and build your business with the backing of one of the most successful logistics firms in North America, visit www.spi3pl.com to learn more. Do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down the realities of the transportation industry, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of the day, I only speak to transportation professionals because I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. I got a very special guest for you guys here today. He's a longtime listener of the show, and I get often asked, how do I come on the show? It's pretty simple. DM me. I read all of my own DMs, and if you're not in conflict with any of my advertisers or anything like that for whatever service you provide or, whatever company you're with, I will gladly have most people on the show. And I say, as long, because if you're not in competition with my advertisers, because that's like kind of my competitive advantage out there. I don't feature any of my competitors' advertisers on my podcast here. And so, yeah, it's as simple as that. And a lot of these longtime listeners out there, I mean, Corey Buchan's one of them. One of these days, I'm going to get Corey to come on the show as well. Happy Thirsty Thursday. But yeah, if you guys are viewing the show often, you want to jump on, just shoot me a DM, you guys. We'll gladly talk. But with that being said, we're going to talk about this guy's journey in the industry, overcoming some obstacles in business and all of that stuff. So I got Mr. Steve Setka on the show today. Steve, what is up?
Jolie, thanks for having me on, man. It's fantastic. Like you said, I DM'd you probably, a month or two ago, and ironed out a few kinks, and here we are. So very excited to be on.
It's as simple as that. And I'm glad that you did, man. I know we talked for the first time a week or two ago, and I could tell, like, within the first 38 seconds, I'm like, damn, we got to get Steve on. Like, this is going to be a good conversation out there. But before we get into anything further, man, like what brought you into freight, man? How'd you get your start in transportation?
Joe, I want to tell you a little bit about my journey, going back here, because I don't have any experience or any background in this industry prior to jumping into it about 7 years ago. I live in Canada. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and, public school educated, just like yourself, mixed in a little bit of private education there throughout my childhood, had a wonderful family growing up, and I went to university, and no disrespect to the university I went to. It's a wonderful institution, but I got a degree just like anybody else that I would consider now a piece of toilet paper that I haven't necessarily used ever in my life. I have an education background, an education degree, and a kinesiology and phys ed background. So I never really used that piece of paper, that degree. And after university, I wasn't the most inclined student per se. C's get degrees. It's kind of how I operated, but I got the piece of paper, right? I left for a couple of years. I went to Australia for 2 years, lived over there, lived in a few spots around Canada for a couple of years, and then came back. And one of the reasons I came back was because my father reached out to me, of course, when I was living overseas, and he said, "Hey, I'm kind of having like an end of career crisis." He was in his mid 50s at the time. And I want to go into business for myself. And, I found this great opportunity. It's a franchise network. It's in freight and logistics. And I'm like, what is freight? What is logistics?
Yeah.
Right? I didn't know how to sell. I didn't know business. I didn't know trucking. And, over the next 7-8 months, this was in 2017 when we were chatting. I would have been in my mid 20s at the time. We signed a contract with this network, InXpress, to join the industry and become freight brokers and freight whisperers and whatnot. And that's my start in the industry.
Dude, I love that. How is it like working with your dad? Is your dad still involved in everything?
Oh yeah. He's still involved. He's an accountant. So
Okay.
he has a CPA background, and it's fantastic. We're like two peas in a pod. And family business has its ups and downs, and it's the greatest thing I've ever done. But it's also one of the most challenging things I've ever done, for sure. So, I have to overcome that obstacle, Chris, that people say things like, "Oh, you work for your dad," or "You're just buying the company from your dad," or he gave you a job, all that. That wasn't the case. We started this together. I was young. He was a little bit older. I had extroversion tendencies, a lot of energy, a lot of piss and vinegar, and he had that background of finance and administration and direction of companies. Even though he'd never owned his own business before, he had been in the world of small business and controlling money for a long period of time. So it's been fantastic, to say the least. But my sister's also involved too. So
nice.
that makes it interesting as well. Plus a couple other non-family members.
Dude, it's interesting to, like kind of getting out there, like with you with the franchise model, and then me with SPI, being in the agent model and everything. It's one of those things that just like, admittedly a couple of years ago, I didn't even know was like a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then cause for me, I have very glowing remarks to say about SPI as a company and everything. And my biggest surprise of it all is it is like the financial risk side of it and how low it is, and how, like, at least with me and SPI, man, like they take on all the financial risk. They really do. They front all the capital to pay the carriers, to pay us as agents for them before they get the money from our customers, right? So they're kind of like double exposed out there because they're paying us, they're paying the carriers and everything sometimes before they get paid from the customers. And then on top of it, insurance, the claims process, all of that stuff. And it's like, for me, I feel like most people don't realize how intricate it is to move freight. You think like, oh, I just cold called the shipper. They gave me this product. I put it on a truck, and then I just make all this money, and then there's no risk involved at all. And I think that that's such a fallacy out there in the market. And because it's like you never think about these things until you need it. And that's why I love growing my business inside of the agent model like that, because it's like, yeah, we have to do the right thing. Obviously, like we have to be organized and all of that stuff. But like, man, the risk is pretty minimum. I mean, are you kind of in the franchise model with what you're in right now? Is that very similar?
Absolutely. I mean, I can echo your sentiment, Chris, for sure. It's it's just a little bit different. We're in a franchise model. Of course, we pay, royalties in the same, maybe a little bit different way than what you would with SPI. But it's fantastic that, doing this. I mean, I would consider myself somewhat of an entrepreneur within InXpress, to take a word from Andy Frisella's podcast there, turned to an entrepreneur, right? So having the back end, having the office manage the carrier relationships, the finance, the administration, having that support network behind you is tremendous. And, taking a little bit of that risk off your shoulders. We pay for it, of course. And I assume anybody who would be in a similar model does. And, you kind of consider it like a tax that the government, takes from you in terms of, supplying, economic value to the country. But I wouldn't be able to do it without them. And I have very high praise for InXpress and our leadership in Canada, our leadership in the US, and the leadership that I know around the world, since our organization is in 14 countries around the world. It's fantastic. And, sometimes I find myself, opposed to what the franchisor is doing. And sometimes you find yourself, in favor of it, right? But in the long run, you have to consider yourself blessed and very fortunate to have people that are in the industry with you, that have more knowledge, that have more expertise, that are backing you up, because none of us can do this on our own. There's no self-made man. There's no self-made millionaire. We all have power teams behind us that create this fantastic opportunity for us to operate in this specific instance in freight.
Yeah, dude, I think that, because it's like there's so many obstacles that you have to overcome in business or, early on and forever, right? Like the obstacles and the challenges and all that, they never go away, right? Like I think the day you can sit back and be like, put my feet up. Oh, I'm good, man. That's the day you've officially died,
That's right.
and I think that, when you're going out there and you're trying to build anything, not having systems in place, not having an infrastructure, not having a process to follow, those are still all things that you kind of have to develop out on your own anyways. But I think a lot of it is the guidance factor, because I, fortunately, unfortunately been through some shit in my career. So like, I know how to handle a lot of these scenarios that we're faced with. Right. But I couldn't imagine if you didn't, right? If you didn't know what an insurance claim was, or if you didn't know how to vet a carrier or vet a customer or run credit checks on customers and stuff like that, because that's a whole other thing that's not talked about at all is there are plenty of shippers out there and customers. I don't want to make it sound like everybody, but like there are shippers and customers that are out there that do not pay their bills. There are businesses out there that are not creditworthy and they're, again, they look for people to kind of come in who don't run that, don't run credit checks, don't run business checks on them. And then they rack up massive amounts of debt. I've seen this happen to my buddies who own their own freight brokerages, who've even done credit checks. They've done all of that and they still got hosed out of lots and lots of money.
We've experienced the same thing. I mean, it's, I would say, the fly-by-nighters, there's fly-by-night truckers out there. There's fly-by-night carriers. There's fly-by-night brokers. Right. There's people in this industry that are not legitimate, just like any industry in the world per se. And, you have to, do your checks and balances and your due diligence with your customers, which is one of the hardest barriers to get around. You're prospecting, you're cold calling, you're doing the drill, whatever that drill is for you every single day. Right. And you come across an opportunity. Like I remember when we started in this industry and started with this business, you would take whatever you could. Yeah. I mean, someone would say, "Hey, I got a combine to ship," and you're like, "I don't even know how to move that, but we'll try because we don't really have anything else," and you're just grasping at straws, right? And then you're looking at a variety of different things in order to make that work and acquire that shipment / customer, and then you've got to look at the back end and the finance and how legitimate of a company they are and how long they've been in business. It's so difficult. And these days and age, finding shippers in order to move freight with is no easy task, man. This is not a weak at heart type of industry, and when you're working with carriers, you're adding margins on top of that as well too, so that you can make money, so that they can make money. It's got to be fair. It's got to be legitimate. And, I talk about, the value of, doing the right thing. And I know you talk about this on your show as well too, is that you want to make sure you're working with reputable carriers. The carriers want to make sure they're working with reputable brokers and shippers. So it's, there could be 3, 4, 5 parties involved in a shipment here. And you have a breakdown in one of those parties or an illegitimate intention can affect the entirety of the shipment / a relationship. So it's very delicate.
Yeah, dude. It's, it's one of those, again, nothing's easy, obviously, but I think right now, and I don't ever want to like deter people from going out and making cold calls and doing all of that stuff, right? Because I don't have the luxury of like, oh, I got enough business to sustain us, right? Like I don't at all. And we're out there, we're cold calling shippers every single day.
Likewise.
As soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to go do a couple of local site visits here in Phoenix. And then I'm going to go back to making my dials when I get back in the office. And this is like legitimately probably the hardest market I've ever had to develop business in. But there is business out there. And I think a lot of the obstacles that people are faced with are, they just stop at the first one, where it's like, I was talking to a buddy last night and I told him, and I just try and look for the yes in every conversation. And it might not be a yes, we're going to set you up, send us your information, we'll add you, we'll let you bid on our freight. That might not be the yes, but the yes might come in the form of, hey, we're not adding anybody. We do work with brokers, but we've been working with them for a couple of years now, so we're good. That's a yes to me. That's a, hey, boom, I can follow up with them, because I'm constantly trying to filter through, and I feel like as a sales rep, you need to look for the yes in every single phone call that
Yep.
you're on. You can't get, and it's very easy to get hung up on the no's and the amount of no's and the amount of no answers and the rejection and everything else. But it's like, for me, it's all about framing when it comes down to business development. It really is. It's framing things for what it is. Hey, I'm just calling and introducing myself. That's it. I'm not asking for anything from them. This is who we are. This is what we do. If you're a business owner, no one's going to sell for you. Like, you have to be the one who's out there selling for yourself. And then on top of that, okay, they might be slow right now, but do they work with brokers? They do. Awesome. I'm going to call them back. When's a better time for me to follow back up with them? Stuff like that. I just try and find that positive to keep me going through, because it's funny, man. Like, out of all the business books that I read, out of all of the podcasts and stuff that I listen to, every single industry out there in business development has like a 99% rejection rate. It does not.
I feel you, Chris. I do the same. I listen to a few podcasts, Mark Hunter being one of them, and then Mike Weinberg is another one, who are good sales coaches online. And, I read books and whatnot. Regardless of how much you read books, you learn, you listen, you read, you have to go through that pain for sure. And, if I were to write a book in the future, Chris, it would be called My Teeth Are Still Intact. You can see, I feel like I still have a healthy smile because they've been beaten in so many times, and they've been kicked in hundreds of times going through this. I mean, sales is my predominant role within this company. I lead our sales team. I manage a group of people. I do sales myself. I do marketing and initiatives, cold calls, outreaches, in-person visits, all of the above. And I love it. I really do. But it didn't come easily. It still is not easy. It's very difficult. And, it took some time in order to get, used to the fact that rejection is real. It's the majority of what you're going to go through. And you just have to, bounce back. And, I've taken this attitude of like, I don't really care what people think of me these days. I do care a little bit, of course. I'm not a psychopath. But, I don't want people to necessarily think that I'm out there for any other reason than to develop our business, to grow, to solve problems, and to help them with what they need to do in their business and make them successful. And the reward for that is financial gain, of course. But, like I said, it's not for the weak at heart. It's very challenging. It's very difficult. And just do the drill every single day and it will come. Like 1 out of 100 customer, calls you're going to make are going to be a successful activated shipper. But, if you expect to make 5 phone calls a day and get a shipper a week, you're not, it's just not going to happen.
How do you deal with that? The negative mental, like when those negative thoughts creep into your head, because I think that this is something, I will openly say it. I'm a very competitive person. I fucking hate losing more than I like winning. So it's like that little bit comes into me when I'm going through it, because like, ultimately, I can't control what happens on the other end of the phone, right? I can control how prepared I am. I can control all of that. But how do you handle that? How do you get that when you're like, the 15th straight hang up or the 15th straight no? What goes through your mind? How do you regain that to be like, all right, I got to get back up and make this next dial?
Well, you know what, Chris, it's important to say that I'm also human, and so are you. So like, we have emotions, right? And we feel the pain just like anybody else would. I think, you and I both would consider ourselves people that can, tolerate a higher threshold of rejection, higher threshold of challenge, of difficulty. If we couldn't, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. So, I live a very similar lifestyle to, I know that what you do. I mean, I work out every single day. I'm very athletically inclined. I put healthy food in my body. I'm drinking water all the time, right? So, I mean, those are little things that make a big difference in my life that allow me to get through the hardship and the difficulty, right? And I have these mantras that I remind myself of all the time. I got God on my side, number one. And, what he tells me often is that, life's really hard and you're being tested all the time, but just keep going. Just keep going, right? Like, don't stop, right? On one side of the equation, you have difficulties and challenges, and the other side, you always have a solution, right? So, if you can continue to put, positive information and energy into your mind, if you can be around the right people, like, associations that we're a part of. I'm getting married very soon, and I have a fiance and a future wife here that's very, very supportive. And, I got a family that's fantastic. You can get through all that. And if at the end of the day, dealing with negativity is easier if at the end of the day, if you can sit down and collect wins. So every single day with our team, we sit down at 4:30 and we say over Zoom or over the phone or whatever and say, hey, how did you win today? And your win could be, I got out of bed this morning, or I feel great, I feel good, or hey, I made 10 calls. Like, it could be very simple. I drank 1 liter or 2 liters of water, right? It's not always like tangible freight results or experiences in businesses. Sometimes wins are incredible. Oh, I did a ripper margin load today. It was a flat deck from Phoenix to Winnipeg, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It's a mentality, it's a mindset, and it takes a long time to develop that, but it's so worth it, man.
How, I can go in like so many different directions with that. I do try and like classify a lot of things that, as wins throughout the day. So I am coming into, I work out early every single morning because like I like to get something hard physically out of the way right away, because like, dude,
Lifetime Gym, right? Is that the one on Instagram? I see your photos.
Yeah, Lifetime man, every single morning. And but like I grew up doing manual labor, right? Like that was the only thing I ever did up until I was probably 25 years old. I only did manual labor. And to be honest with you, man, I miss the physicality of that. I really do. So it's like, I got to do something that's hard, because otherwise, man, like I'm sitting in an air conditioned office all day long, like ultimately. Right. And when you come from a blue collar background, like I do, I'm kind of like, I don't feel like I accomplish shit unless I'm like out there physically doing stuff, and that's just the mentality that my old man put in my head from a very young age. And, because his whole thing is you're not above any job, and so it's like, I've done that. So now I like to find those things like, all right, what's kind of physically hard, what's a task that I can kind of get out of the way that pushes me a little bit. But I also think it kind of prepares me for going in there and dealing with a lot of the stresses that kind of come along with it. And, you brought up that thing about doing a small win, about maybe it's just making 10 calls. How do you, because I'm a big fan of building into things. I think that when you release people out in there to start doing sales and you're like, you got to make 100 calls a day, I think that that's an insurmountable number that drives so many people away from actually doing the work. Where I like the build-up approach. Maybe it's like, you're a newer rep, or you're just starting out in a new role or a new job. Hey, 5 calls a day, research your prospects, be prepared, then dial. And then you increase it. Next week, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And then all of a sudden you're making 30 calls a day. Yeah. That's a very formidable number if you're going out there and you're doing your research and you're preparing yourself for that. So it's like, what are your thoughts on that build-up approach? Because I'm 100% on board with easing people in and building them up.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I would agree for sure to a point. I would say that there's a mixture between quantity and quality when it comes to outreach or when it comes to prospecting. But I'm going to take it one step further, Chris. I don't think it's necessarily how many people you talk to in a day, or how quality the conversations you had throughout the day. I heard something very interesting on a show recently I was listening to. It's how many people did you impact in that day, right? Because that's where you're creating value, and that's where the mutual relationship can exist between yourself and a shipper or a customer, client, whatever you want to call it. So that build-up approach is fantastic. I think everything in life, everything in business is a process, right? It's chipping away at that stone, one little hack at a time. You don't I'm Canadian here, you don't hack down a tree like a lumberjack does by hitting, the spot one time or hitting 40 different spots one time. You hit that same spot hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and then eventually that tree, goes down, right? So it's a reference that I appreciate, and I think about every day, and I have my routine every morning that I go through exactly the same as what you do. Not exactly the same, a little bit different.
I know what you mean.
But it's just, it's that block. It's just chipping away at that sculpture. We're creating a beautiful piece of art here.
Yeah, dude. I think a lot of my mentality and perspective on this topic in particular has really changed after doing 75 hard a few times. And then I'm in the Live Hard program, because it is really, man, it's like, it's that one day at a time mentality where it's like, all right, I woke up, I got to get my shit done, and then I'm going to go to bed, and then I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to get my tasks done. And it's getting those critical tasks done, and, going through that, and then, losing a bunch of weight and keeping the, the weight off and stuff like that. I'm like, all right, it's 1 pound at a time. Like, you're not going to instantly lose 50 pounds overnight. And, and everything else. So it's like, what steps can you implement in place to get the progress that's desired? And I think too many people put too much emphasis on the end goal. The end goal, whatever your end goal is. My end goal, man, is to build the largest company that I possibly can that makes the most positive impact on the transportation industry. That, in my vision, that's 15 locations nationwide. That's warehousing, that's trucking, that's all of that stuff that comes along with it. But if I don't do my daily tasks today, that end vision will never happen. So it's like, all right, what can you do today? How do you implement that process? And then, but most importantly, how do you follow that process? And then when you get efficient in that process, how do you improve upon that? How do you add stuff onto that?
That's fantastic. No, I totally agree. It's always chipping away at that block. Jeff Olson wrote a good book called The Slight Edge that I know most of your listeners probably know of. And it talks about 1% every single day, or what's that one thing that you can do every day to move forward. For sure. I think about that all the time. Chris, I want to get a little bit vulnerable with you and your guests here on the show quickly. I got a lot of celebration, of life, of death, of marriage, all these types of things occurring in my life right now. There's a couple people in my life that are not super, super close, but they're close enough to me that I care, that are dying. Right. I was visiting, a woman in the hospital last night, and I went to a celebration of life after that. With a friend of mine from back in the university days I haven't seen for a while, that passed away at 34. And, you just think about people like that didn't have the opportunities that we have now, because either they're dying, or they died, or they passed away, or, they're sick, or they're ill. And it just gives me that extra push of energy in order to be great in my world and to be excellent for my family, for my future wife, for my future children, for my, my business, all those different types of things. And then the other side of the equation, you talk about all the positive things happening. I'm getting married in 2 weeks. I have this incredible wedding coming up. I'm very excited for this future. I've come across something that I'm actually quite good at, pimping loads and moving freight. And it helps me stay on track, right? So when those wheels get off path, or they're going in a different direction, it helps me move back on track so that I can, do what I need to do. And, it's the long game. Like, are you here to play the short game, or are you here to play the long game? Because anybody who's here to play the short game, which is literally like 80% of the world these days, because they quit before they get to anything successful, you're not going to succeed. So I'm here for the long game. I've been doing this for 7 years. My father never worked at one job for more than 7 years, or more than 3 or 4 or 5 years, right? So that was like a pattern that I had to break in my life in order to get really good at something, commit, develop the skill set, and take the time to build expertise. So that's where we're at, Chris. It's awesome. I love the ride.
No, dude, I'm right there with you. And I think, like, it's the older I get, my perspective, I mean, dude, it definitely shifts, right? Like, it shifts a lot, especially when you bring up the part, when you lose people that you were close with. And then especially when people your age start passing away and stuff like that, it can really change how you approach a lot of things. I mean, it's easy to also take the mentality of, oh, well, at least it wasn't me. Cause I think that's kind of like what a lot of people do with that one. But if you actually do stop and think about it, especially, when it's somebody who's young, 34 years old, same thing. I've had people that I've known that have since passed away as well, that are my age as well. And you're like, when you're really in those moments and you're like, if you think about that, you're like, it's really not that much what you're trying to do. Like, ultimately, it's not life or death what you're trying to do. In your head, it is. In your head, it's built up because it's like, it's the big boogeyman, the big scary monster that's out there. But like, really, once you kind of rip the Band-Aid off and just start, because I think, like, it does reach a point where you're like, you're just spending time preparing to do nothing. You eventually, you got to rip the Band-Aid off. You got to get out there, and you will formulate your own way that is successful out there in the market from a business development standpoint, or a business, or health, whatever it is. You just got to, I think, like, cause I am that way to a point, right? Where it's like, I kind of overthink things, or I think, like, I'll get started in something and I'm like, oh, this might work it out better. And, a lot of that, was in regards to, like, my health and stuff. And then eventually I'm like, all right, I got to stop. And, like, I say this now, fortunately, God blessed me with an autoimmune disease that made me change how I do everything. And it made it
right?
very simple of like, hey, just eat this. This is all you got to do, man.
Yeah.
You will get the results that you need. And it's the same thing in business, man. It's like, just start, and then you can make the little tweaks as you go, but you just got to start. The worst thing, I cold call every single day.
Yeah.
The worst thing somebody has said to me over the last 4 weeks, we're not adding anybody. We don't need to call back. And then they hung up.
Yeah.
That was it. That was the worst fucking case scenario. So it's just like, I want to put that out there because I know everybody goes through this shit. I'm not the only one. The listeners, you're not the only one either. We all go through it. We all get the same level of rejection. But again, it's a lot worse when you're thinking about doing something than when you actually just fucking jump in feet first and start making things happen.
Absolutely. No, I can relate tremendously, Chris. I go through the same experiences as well, too. I've had stories like that as well, too. I had a funny experience once. I'll tell you quick when I was doing door knocking, because I used to do a lot of that where someone said, hey, I'm in the middle of something. Leave me alone, blah, blah, blah. And I said, there's a sign on the front of your door. It says no soliciting. What the heck does that mean? The guy told me to F off. It was so funny. But if you can make enjoyable experiences out of, this hardship you go through, you can't lose. I mean, you're only going to win, right? And we build our business here in my mind off of two things: personality and speed of communication. Just like you, I'm very quick on responding and reacting to emails, and I got a couple that are going to be tapped up right after I get off this call. And the personality is fun; it's enjoyable. I pimp loads. I whisper freight. Like, I mean, who the heck talks like that? This is why I build business on my own, because I don't want somebody to tell me if I can say that or if I can't say that, right? Because people like humans, you know what I mean? Like, I want to be the same person in my professional life as I am in my personal life, and not live by a facade of where I have to, work for somebody else and live by rules I don't agree with. I have morals and ethics. They just might be a little bit different than what society would consider acceptable.
Dude, I couldn't agree with that more. And I know we got to wrap here, but I want to end on this. As somebody who has been creating content and had a podcast for 4+ years now, if you're going to start doing any of this, as Steve said, literally just be yourself. It is so much easier to come on, be you, and then go back and go in your regular life and just continue to be that. Like, there is no difference. And dude, that's like my greatest like compliment anybody gives me is it's like, dude, you're the same person in real life as you are on your podcast. I'm like, yeah, that's a fucking point. Yeah. But we got to wrap here because I got to get after it, as do you. Steve, I appreciate you joining me, man. I'm going to have you back on here soon. How does anybody reach out to you, though, to find out more about what you guys got going on?
Well, thank you, Chris, man. That means a lot. That's what attracted me to your show, by the way, is this is so real, so raw. I went above and beyond what I knew in the industry. I'm like, I got to find a show that, that I really enjoy. That's why I've been listening for a year and a half. But anyways, you can reach out on LinkedIn. That's the main way to reach out for sure. Steve Setka, InXpress is the company. I mean, steve.setka@inxpress.com is the email address. And I'd love to connect with people, as I have done with other guests on your show. I actually have a call with Maya from yesterday's show in about 5 minutes here. So I'm very excited. Yeah. Thank you for having me on, Chris.
Dude, anytime. And that's going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys can't find Steve for whatever reason, just hit me up. I'll gladly put you guys in contact with him. As always, if you guys got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show. Share it out there to your network, because if you see value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.